The Influence of Modern Art, Part B. In this segment, we'll cover Dada, Surrealism, and Expressionism. The Dada movement was a reaction to the horrors of war. It was an anti-art movement that was also aligned with the radical left and rejected artistic conventions. The movement included visual arts, poetry, literature, theater, music, and graphics, and it was colorful, erratic, and absurd. Here are the style characteristics for Dada. Futurism's violent revolutionary techniques were adopted by the Dadaists, constructivists, and Gestalt movements that we'll talk about in future chapters. Dada writers and artists sought absolute freedom from tradition, and to do this they used shock, protest, and nonsense. Their work rebelled against the horrors of World War I, along with the decadence of European society, the blind faith they saw in technology, and the inadequacy of religion and conventional moral codes. Dada's guiding spirit was Tristan Tzara, a Paris-based Romanian poet and editor of the periodical Dada. He was joined by poets Hugo Ball, Richard Husselbach, and artist Jean Arp, and together they explored sound poetry, nonsense poetry, and chance poetry. On the right, you see a plaque from the Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich, Switzerland, commemorating the birth of Dada. We see a casual organization of space with found illustrations that are randomly dispersed about the page with no particular communicative intent. As you look at the page, you can see that it does look different from futurist poetry. We see these clip art illustrations and a bit more order in the organization of the type. The German author, poet, and essentially the founder of the Dada movement, Hugo Ball, spent a lot of time in Zurich. Among his other accomplishments, he was a pioneer in the development of sound poetry. Take a look to the right at this poem. It really doesn't make any sense when you read it. And in the middle, you see one of the more theatrical performances. The most prominent visual artist and the movement's most articulate spokesperson was Marcel Duchamp. His ready-made sculptures, like the bicycle well mounted on a wooden stool, or the fountain, which we see on the right, expressed the philosophy of absolute freedom, in which the artist was entitled to individual decision and choice. In the middle, we see a very masterful painting that he created, The Nude Descending the Staircase, and in it we see those echoes of both Cubism and Futurism. Duchamp shocked the public when he painted a mustache and beard on a reproduction of the Mona Lisa. This was intended as an assault on tradition and a public that he felt had lost the humanistic spirit of the Renaissance. Earlier Cubism had influenced his analysis of subjects as geometric planes, while Futurism inspired him to convey time and motion. Duchamp referred to his sculptures as ready-mades. He took utilitarian objects, not generally considered to be art, transformed them by adding to them, changing them, simply renaming or reorienting them and placing them in an appropriate setting. In this particular piece, we see a cheap postcard reproduction of Leonardo da Vinci's early 16th century painting, the Mona Lisa. Again, he changed it by drawing a mustache and a beard in pencil. Although Dadaists claimed to be anti-art, several created meaningful visual art and really influenced graphic design. People like Raoul Haussmann and Hannah Höch, who worked in the medium of photomontage, the technique of manipulating found photographic images to create these jarring juxtapositions and chance associations. Here's a great example from Hannah Haack. We see a collage of pasted papers that is a remarkable collage and really visually compelling. This is a self-portrait by Raoul Hausmann. The Dadaists used scissors and glue rather than paintbrushes and paint to express their view of modern life through images presented by the media. A variation on collage, photomontage utilized actual or reproductions of real photographs that were printed in the press. In this Dada poster for the play Party of the Bearded Heart, vitality and legibility are achieved using typographic material from over 40 different fonts. Here's some additional Dada pieces. Again, we see the appearance of that clip art. This is the work of Theo van Doesburg, who we'll hear about when we get to the De Stijl chapters. George Grosz created this powerful piece, Work and Do Not Despair. The crass image really signifies the decadence of the period. Kurt Schwitters of Hanover, Germany, created a non-political offshoot of the Dada movement that he named März, from the word Kommerz or commerce. His März collages were strong design compositions based on nonsense, surprise, and chance that were made by combining printed ephemera, rubbish, and found materials. He wrote and designed poetry, which he defined as the interaction of elements, letters, syllables, words, and sentences. In the 1920s, constructivism became an added influence on Kurt Schwitters. Between 1923 and 1932, he published 24 issues of a periodical he created, März, while running a successful graphic design studio. Here on the right, we see material that he would gather from the streets, alleys, and even garbage cans. He would wash it, catalog it according to size and color, and use it as the raw material for his art. Here we see his graphic design side. The 11th issue was devoted to advertising typography and included ads that Schwitters designed for Pelican, a manufacturer of office equipment and supplies. I think they demonstrate his growing interest in constructivism that we'll learn about in a future chapter. The Berlin Dadaists John Heartfield and George Grosz created visual communications to raise public awareness and promote social change. John Heartfield is my favorite Dadaist, and in his powerful posters, books, and magazine covers, as well as political illustrations and cartoons, he uses photomontage as an effective propaganda weapon aimed directly at the Weimar Republic and the growing Nazi Party. Grosz, on the other hand, used satire and caricature to attack a corrupt society and advocate for a classless social system. By the time the Dada movement ended in 1922, it had enriched the visual vocabulary, starting by Futurism, furthering Cubism's concept of letter forms as concrete visual shapes, not just phonetic symbols, and then released typographic design from the horizontal and vertical constraints that had been imposed on it due to letterpress. So here we see two covers for AIZ magazine. In the center, shells form a cathedral, and this is symbolizing the mentality of military expansion and the arms race. We see a swastika, a dollar mark, and a pound sign right up on the top of that cathedral made out of bullet shells. The piece on the right is called The Meaning of the Hitler Salute. an illustration attacking the press from 1930. There's a surreal head wrapped in newspaper that appears over a headline that reads, "Whoever reads the bourgeois press turns blind and deaf. Away with the stultifying bandages." And then on the left, we see another piece, Adolf the Superman swallows gold and spouts rubbish. It's a visualized photomontage X-ray of Hitler. Notice that his esophagus is made of gold coins. As you can imagine, John Heartfield's collages were not popular with the Nazi Party. Eventually, the pressure became so great that he had to flee to Czechoslovakia. There, he continued to create work like this and mail it directly to heads of the Nazi Party. In this one, the text reads, "O Tannenbaum in Germany, how crooked are your branches." We see this very sickly, pathetic looking, almost Charlie Brown special-like Christmas tree. And it's symbolizing the ethos of the Third Reich. Notice both the stand and the branches form the swastika. Now we move to Surrealism, which occurred between 1924 and lasted a long time till 1966. It grew out of Dada, and it was a literary and art movement. It was greatly influenced by theories and the dream studies of Sigmund Freud. I don't know about you, but I am really interested in dreams. I like to read about them as well as keep a dream journal. Another practice that Surrealists participated in is what we call automatic writing. And I do this automatic writing on a daily basis. When I get up first thing, I like to sit at my computer and just write whatever comes to mind because I can type really fast. And it really helps me get all of that out of my system and a nice level playing field to start my day and feel more creative. Surrealists were really into the unconscious mind and free association, and they valued spontaneity and uninhibited expression. This began as an international intellectual and political movement, and the political ideas of Karl Marx were quite influential. These are the style characteristics of Surrealism: dream imagery, personal symbolism, and a logical juxtaposition of elements, putting the familiar in an unfamiliar setting. And I'll show you examples of that. It's thought that the very first Surrealist was Giorgio de Chirico, but others followed, including Max Ernst, René Magritte, and Salvador Dali. Now, Surrealism has greatly affected society and visual communications, especially photography and illustration. De Chirico was a member of the short-lived Italian metaphysical school of painting, and he painted these hauntingly empty vistas of the Italian Renaissance palaces and squares. And as you can see by the piece on the right, they possess an intense melancholy. There were always vacant buildings, harsh shadows, deeply tilted perspectives, and enigmatic images that conveyed emotions far removed from an ordinary experience. This particular piece on the left, The Philosopher Conquest, shows de Chirico's timeless poetry really stops short of the bizarre or the supernatural. And on the right, the piece is called The Departure of the Poet. Max Ernst, another surrealist, used a number of collage techniques that have been adopted in graphic communications. Frottage, which uses rubbings to compose directly on paper, and dialchomania, Ernst's process of transferring images from printed matter to a drawing or painting and then incorporating them in an unexpected way. He was a restless German Dadaist originally who used a number of techniques that again have been adopted in graphic communications. Fascinated by wood engravings of the 19th century novels and catalogs, he reinvented them, by using collage techniques to create strange juxtapositions like the one you see on the right. Here we see a piece called A Week of Kindness. Photomechanical printing techniques obliterate cut edges and unify the image, and all this happened before the invention of Photoshop. René Magritte is my favorite surrealist. He's from Belgium, and he used really jolting and ambiguous scale changes, defied the laws of gravity and light, and created unexpected juxtapositions while maintaining a poetic dialogue really between reality and illusion, truth and fiction. His prolific body of images inspired many visual communications. Magritte's images were rendered in careful naturalism, but set in an illusionary dreamscape. One of his most common artistic devices was the use of objects to hide what lies behind them. On the right is a good example. In front of a window, seen from inside a room, he places a painting representing exactly that portion of the landscape covered by the painting. Thus, the tree in the picture hid the tree behind it, outside the room. For the spectator, it was both inside the room, within the painting, and outside in the real landscape. This piece is called Time Transfixed, and the story goes that a wealthy patron asked him to create a painting to go over this fireplace. Well, he took it rather literally. He painted the fireplace, the clock, and the candlesticks exactly as they were, but added this rather stunning image, a locomotive coming straight at the viewer. Magritte loved putting unrelated objects in juxtaposition. The piece on the right is called The Treachery of Images, and it says, "This is not a pipe." Notice that space, color, perspective, and figures are all rendered in careful naturalism, but set in an illusionary dreamscape. This also inspired visual communications. It's a union that suggests the essential mystery of the world. Art for me is not an end in itself, he said, but a means of evoking that mystery. It seems Magritte wanted the majesty and fascinating ambiguity of his work to speak directly to the viewer. Miró was a Spanish painter, sculptor, and ceramicist born in Barcelona. He earned international acclaim. His work has been interpreted as surrealism, a sandbox for the subconscious mind, a recreation of the childlike, and also a manifestation of the pride of Catalonia. In numerous interviews dating from the 30s onwards, he expressed his contempt for conventional painting methods as a way of supporting bourgeois society, and declared an assassination of painting in favor of upsetting the visual elements of an established painting. In this example, we see his symbolic work applied to book design in quite an arresting way. Perhaps the most famous surrealist is Salvador Dali. He's a flamboyant figure who influenced graphic design in two ways. His deep perspectives inspired designers to bring depth to the flat printed page, and his approach to simultaneity has often been imitated in posters and editorial images. In the persistence of memory, you notice that the clocks are literally melting away and thus seem anything but persistent in this depiction. Likewise, the ants are eating away the face of the red clock, also symbolizing the decaying and therefore impermanent nature of our arbitrary way of keeping time. On the left, we see a piece, The Hallucinogenic Toreador. In it, he transmits his wife's dislike for bullfighting and combines optical illusions and symbols. On the right, his wife and muse, Gala, is portrayed as the Madonna. That brings us to the final style in this chapter, Expressionism, which lasted from 1905 to 1930. Expressionist artists were disturbed by human behavior in the modern world. They were frustrated and angry about the violence of World War I and upset about the loss of spirituality and negative effects of capitalism. They expressed inner feelings with distorted forms and strong colors, exaggerated, agitated brushstrokes, and often used disaffected images of prostitutes with mask-like faces. Here are the style characteristics of Expressionism. Again, it's the tendency to depict subjective emotions and personal responses to subjects and events. And it emerged as an organized movement in Germany before World War I and was represented by two groups, Die Brücke, which means the bridge, and Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider. A forerunner of Expressionism is the Norwegian painter Edvard Munch. Here we see his famous piece, The Scream, and he explored themes of love, fear, death, melancholy, and anxiety. This is Kath Schmidt-Kollwitz, and her posters expressed with great emotional power her concern for social outcasts and the poor. A German expressionist, she documented the plight of the working poor in figurative drawings, prints, sculpture, and again, these powerful posters. They convey great empathy for the suffering of women and children. The piece on the right is a powerful anti-war statement that was commissioned by the International Association of Labor Unions in Amsterdam. Now, Kollwitz suffered anxiety during her childhood due to the death of her siblings, including the very early death of her youngest brother. And it is suggested that she suffered from a childhood neurological disorder called Alice in Wonderland syndrome. This is because of sensory hallucinations she had and migraines. On the left, we see Woman with a Dead Child, and on the right, March of the Weavers. The Russian immigrant Wassily Kandinsky led the German Der Blaue Reiter group and became the leading advocate of art that could reveal the spiritual nature of people through the orchestration of color, line, and form on the canvas. His book concerning the spiritual in art was an early argument for non-objective art capable of conveying emotions from the artist to the observer through purely visual means, without subject matter or literal symbols. Kandinsky compared color and form to music and its ability to express deep human emotion. This belief in the autonomy and spiritual values of color led to the courageous emancipation of his painting from motifs and representational images. On the left, you see one of his more realistic paintings where we recognize subject matter, and on the right, you see composition number 7, which really shows his full expressionistic style. According to the artist, the piece on the right is the most complex piece he ever painted. He was very interested in music and raised in a musical family. And he also had Asperger's syndrome, which is a form of autism. Many great artists in the history of our planet have had autism, and they include Michelangelo, it is said Van Gogh, Charles Rennie Mackintosh, Andy Warhol, also thinkers like Kafka, Einstein, Beethoven, and Newton. Here we see him conveying emotions through form and color without subject matter or literal symbols. He was the first person credited with creating modern abstract works. He originally was not even an artist, and he didn't pursue that profession until his later years. He was enrolled in the University of Moscow and studied law and economics, and it wasn't till he was 30 that he quit a very promising profession to enroll in a Munich art school. He wasn't admitted right away, so he began to teach himself art. And he was really influenced by Monet's haystacks. He called his art inner beauty, fervor of spirit, and deep spiritual desire, inner necessity. None of his paintings emphasized human beings. They were more abstract figures. He was also an art theorist that helped to found the New Artist Association and actually became president of it in 1909. Okay. Now, Kandinsky taught at the famous Bauhaus in Germany that we'll hear about in a future chapter. Once the Bauhaus was closed, he moved to France, where he died in 1944. His close colleague was Paul Klee, a Swiss artist who synthesized elements inspired by all the modern movements, as well as children's and naive art. He achieved intense subjective power while contributing to the objective formal vocabulary of modern art, and his subject matter was translated into graphic signs and symbols with strong communicative power. In his pedagogical sketchbook, he defined the elements of art, their interaction, motion, and spatial depth, and he published lectures. Klee was also a founding member of Der Blaue Reiter. The color and form theories of both Kandinsky and Klee became important foundations for design and design education through their teaching at the Bauhaus. The new language of modern movements influenced photography too. That's surrealist painter Salvador Dali and Philadelphia-born photographer Man Ray. He moved to Paris and applied Dada and surrealist ideas to photography. Using darkroom manipulation and bizarre photo setups, he explored the creative potential of solarization and created cameraless prints he called rayographs. Do these modern art movements influence design today? The answer is yes. I won't show you all of the movements, but just 3. Here's an example from the illustrator Pablo Lobato, and these are wonderful celebrity portraits. I'm sure you recognize many of the figures here, and it's inspired by Cubism. Take a look at this Dada-inspired package design. In it, we see that nonsense and that intuition, chance. Lastly, look at these beautiful illustrations, paintings by Rafal Olbinski, inspired by surrealism. He's a master of putting the familiar in an unfamiliar setting.